Sun Devil fans, it is a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. Today we are going to be so well-rounded for you guys, kicking this off with basketball, talking about X factors for the remainder of the season as well as the Pac-12 tournament. Then we're going to be talking about ASU versus their big game coming up next season against Oklahoma State. How doomed are they, or do they have a shot? Then we're going to be talking about baseball for the first time this year, giving you guys a very general overview of how the season has gone so far. But that is coming and more. You're listening to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. As always, we are your hosts, Connor Drios and Richie Bradshaw, talking to you guys about everything Arizona State Sun Devils sports. But really quick, today's episode is brought to you by Run Your Pool. March Madness is here, and Run Your Pool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. You can find me at CDrios. You can find Richie at RichieBrads with a Z36. We also have our Locked On Sun Devils Twitter page. It's at LO_Sun Devils. You can also find our content in multiple different platforms, which include audio and a visual. So that could be Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, or at YouTube as well, depending on where you want to get our content. But hit subscribe wherever you are at and never miss an episode when that link drops. You guys are going to be the first to know Locked On Sun Devils has new content for you guys. Now, Richie, let's get into it today. Basketball season's coming to an end, and it's been a very up and down year, right? In times, it felt like I kind of just want this basketball season to end. Like I'm sick of watching this team. They weren't playing games for weeks at a time, obviously due to COVID reasons, but they've won 5 of the last 6. Doesn't make their overall standings on the year incredibly great, but they have 2 games to finish out, which aren't unwinnable. And then maybe a shot at the Pac-12 tournament. And at the end of the day, and this is something I touched on yesterday's podcast, I think at least teams in the Pac-12 view us as dangerous. As we're certainly not the team to beat. We are not the most talented team in the Pac-12, not even close. That being said, I think there's at least enough of a spark in this team to be a little bit dangerous once that tournament starts. That being said,
I think that's the perfect way to word it. Sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, so with that, like it's going to take a team to do it, right? We don't have one single guy that's going to carry us as a team. So with that, we've talked a lot about Marion Jackson this year. We've talked a lot, DJ Horn this year. As of late, we've talked about Marion Jackson, but who else can we talk about? Like, if there's going to be a third or fourth guy that's going to help get us those wins in the tournament, is there somebody that comes to mind for you as that X factor, so to speak?
I mean, it's got to be Jay Heath right now. He is seriously heating up so much. He's becoming one of our most consistent scorers, if not the most consistent scorer right now. He's got himself all the way up to 10.6 points a game, Connor. And I'm going to do myself a favor and pull up his game log. Please hold. So
the last 2, he's put up 18 and 20. So that's definitely playing some hot basketball.
So over the last 5 games, he's had no fewer than 8 points. And with the exception of 1 4-point game against Wazoo, he's got 3 more double-digit games sprinkled into the last, what's that end up being? 5, 6, 9 games. So Jay Heath has definitely been a very hot shooter for the team. He's been shooting right in that 50% range too, Connor, and he's good from deep. Right now, Jay Heath has to be the biggest X factor to end the 2021-2022 season for the Sun Devils. If he continues to play as well as he has, there's not a doubt in my mind that, like you said, ASU will be dangerous. This isn't a team that's going to win the tournament. This isn't a team that's probably going to make the NCAA tournament. However, this is a team that no one in the Pac-12 should take lightly right now. They need to seriously take a look at the Sun Devils and realize, hey, these guys are looking to play spoiler. This isn't a Cinderella team, but this is a team that's out to ruin your season. They want to rub some dirt in your eye, as a famous Bully McGuire would say.
Wow, I can't believe you just made that reference on the show. We're recording.
Gonna put some dirt in your eye.
I don't. Am I supposed to be a professional after that? Because I don't think you're allowed to be after. But regardless, so Jay Heath playing very well as of late. I mean, their only shot at the NCAA tournament at this point is winning the whole thing, right? They have to win the Pac-12 tournament.
Yep.
But Jay Heath is playing well as of late. Definitely one of those X factors we have to talk about. What about like going back to earlier this year, right? Maybe halfway, maybe just before halfway. We kind of talked about some participation trophies, to be honest, at that point in the season of guys we would label as maybe best defender, best offensive player, MVP, things like that. You and I had a bit of a different answer on MVP. Yeah, we weren't winning basketball games necessarily back then, definitely not against quality opponents. So they were times that was a thing. There were times. But you and I gave two different answers. Your answer for MVP up to that point was DJ Horn. I said mine was Kamani Lawrence. Looking at it right now, neither of those guys are necessarily playing their best basketball. And part of like getting to this end of the season and playing well in this tournament for whatever that shot is for the NCAA tournament, it's peaking at the right time, right? Like a lot of the stars almost have to align for this team to be able to peak at that right time. But if you get guys like Marion and Jay Heath playing well, we've seen other guys contribute. And both guys like Jay Heath and Kamani Lawrence have, or not Jay Heath, sorry, DJ Horn and Kamani Lawrence have proved to be good basketball players on this team throughout different points of the season. If you can get either of them back, in my opinion, now you're dangerous. Now you are really dangerous. That does not mean you're going to get four guys putting up 15 plus points for the remainder of the year, right? That's not realistic. But that being said, like if one of those four guys we're talking about right now has an off night, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the year when it was just kind of DJ Horn and maybe one or two other guys sometimes. If you have several guys that are playing super hot basketball right now, this is the time to do it. Let me open it this way. Is there somebody more important, in your opinion, either Kamani or DJ Horn, that they do pick it up at the end of the year?
Between those two, those have to be the most important players. You need Marion and you need Kamani to continue playing consistent basketball. Man, off the top of my head, I don't know if there's anyone else that I would tell you is like a must play well. You want to continue to see Jalen Graham.
Yeah, Jalen Graham would be another
that
name
he's played at. So Jalen Graham's another guy that I would highlight. And man, if you could get anything out of Luther Muhammad, but I just don't feel like you can trust him whatsoever right now. And it is what it is.
He's had his games.
Yeah, exactly. He's had his games, but not Jay Heath. Who did I just say?
Jalen Graham.
Thank you, Jalen Graham. Jalen Graham is another guy that if he can continue on the hot streak that he's been on, you're just going to be in that much better a shape for the remainder of the season, which could help you win out and make some noise in the tournament, which at this point is a huge win for Arizona State basketball right now to finish 14-16 as an overall record. And then if you can win 2 games in the tournament, I would say that this was a rebound season from what it started as.
Yeah, from the start, definitely. It's more likely going to be Bobby Hurley's worst season with ASU. So at the end of the day, we're kind of grasping at something to say this was a positive year in any aspect. But considering the way it started off, I at least I'll listen to an argument about it. But at the end of the day, for the two players I highlighted between Kamani and DJ Horn, I would only say Kamani because you only have 20 guards you're going to be playing. Right? You're going to rotate Jay, Marion, and Jay Heath. So for as far as guys getting out there and getting their minutes, I would like to see Kamani play a little bit better just because at the time when I said he was their MVP up to that point, no, he was not their leading scorer, but he was leading them in just about several other statistics, right? Rebounds, assists, either steals or blocks. He was like second or third in some of those. Right. So for a guy that contributed in multiple facets of the game, if Kamani can play well as well with some of the other guys in this team right now, they've got a shot, right? We might have a discussion about how, hey, maybe we can win this game. You and I will never have a discussion about how we think this is the most talented team in the Pac-12 because that's not realistic.
100%. So give me, we highlighted like 4 or 5 guys, right? Pick one of them. Who is the biggest X factor that needs to just play their absolute best basketball to end the season for the Sun Devils? One player.
I would go with Kamani. They relied on him throughout different points of the year, even though they've won 5 of 6 kind of without him playing well, or at least very consistent. It almost kind of shows you maybe how insignificant he can be at times. But again, like the more depth that you give this team, and for a guy that's going to do it in multiple areas, I would pick Kamani pretty easily.
And I would go ahead and pick my new favorite player over the last few weeks. I am going Marion Jackson. I think the role that he's been in has been absolutely perfect for him to be the sixth man for the team, come off the bench and take more appropriate shots and not taking those hero shots that we were so accustomed to seeing at the beginning of the year. Right now, I feel like he's been your most consistent scorer over the last month and a half, maybe even closer to 2 months, considering we're at the end of February now. Marion has definitely been the guy that feels the most reliable, the most dependable guy, and the guy that I look at and pretty much think like, what before I check the box score, like Marion's going to be the leading scorer. And then I look and more often than not, he is. So I think that Marion Jackson staying in the groove that he's in would make him the biggest X factor for the Sun Devils basketball team to end the year. But I do hear you on Kamani Lawrence, and that was my next choice. He would honestly probably 1A, 1B, because the Sun Devils team's better when Kamani plays good.
Definitely. With that, we'll go ahead and take our first break for this part of the podcast. Next, we're going to be talking about ASU against Oklahoma State for football coming up in months. Why are we talking about that game now? We're at least going to highlight maybe how we think ASU can fare in that game, because that is going to be their biggest game of the year. Maybe not so much in terms of overall Pac-12 play, but as far as games on the schedule, that is going to be, in my opinion, the most exciting game coming up. You're listening to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
March Madness is only 2 weeks away, guys. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual, or are you going for the best? We've done our homework here, and we're running brackets on runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor and Pick X, both really fun in their own ways. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks. All stuff you won't find on ESPN or CBS. If you got a business, Run Your Pool can help you take advantage of some of the madness magic and play alongside your employees or even gain customers. Plus, they offer full white glove customer support, custom branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups you'll ever find. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there.
We are back for the second segment of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. Again, we are free and available on all platforms. Now, Richie, we're going to be talking about football. Again, switching gears, giving everybody the most kind of well-rounded content for today's episode. ASU's got a lot of time and a lot of things to figure out leading up to this game against Oklahoma State. If you had given us last year's roster, even going up against this new roster for Oklahoma State, assuming they potentially take a step back, I still wouldn't feel that well or feel that good about this game per se. But as far as what Oklahoma State is losing, right, what big pieces as far as like maybe quarterbacks, position players, leading tacklers, anything like that you can tell us as far as what they're going to be losing by next season?
The absolute biggest thing that they're missing is Tay Martin. Tay Martin, wide receiver for them, eclipsed 1,000 yards last year on 80 catches with 10 touchdowns. Connor, to put it in perspective, quarterback Spencer Sanders only threw 2,800 yards. So Tay Martin, if you don't include Shane Illingsworth or Ethan Bullock's passing yards, which I'm not sure how they factor into all of this, considering they each only played 2 games. He had almost a third, not almost, over a third of Spencer Sanders' receiving yards, depending on what he received from the rest of the offense. Fun fact for anyone who might recognize the name Tay Martin, he was at Washington State for his first 3 years, but Tay Martin absolutely exploded this year for the Cowboys, and they are losing him, which is the biggest hit to their receiving core. They're also losing their leading rusher from last year in Jalen Warren, who eclipsed 1,200 yards. Defensively, Connor, they just lost their top 4 tacklers. Malcolm Rodriguez, Tyler Lacey, Devin Harper, and Colby Harville-Peel have all graduated from the program. They are no longer there. So similar to Arizona State, the Cowboys are also going to be dealing with a massive rebuild. They are losing a lot of pieces, but ultimately, Connor, they still have the most important position. Quarterback Spencer Sanders will be back for them in 2022.
Yeah, and if that's the most important piece of the offense, and of course it is, they might not necessarily skip a beat per se. ASU is losing a decent amount in the secondary, so while they might be trying to figure out who he's going to be throwing the ball to, we have to figure out who's going to be covering the receivers, right? So even if they have to scramble a little bit on their end, it sounds like we're going to be doing a little bit more on ours. So not a bad position necessarily to be in for Oklahoma State. Now let's maybe head to the defense, unless you had another point there.
No, all I was going to add was that Spencer Sanders is their second leading rusher, and after him was not much. So to your point where you were talking about how the ASU secondary is going to need to figure something out, the one bright side is that front seven, which is a strength for Arizona State going into next year, should be able to contain Oklahoma State inside the trenches, okay? They should be able to shut down any kind of run game that Oklahoma State wants to get going, especially because this is going to happen in week 2 of the college football regular season. I severely doubt that the Cowboys are going to figure out their run game in the first week of the season. So if there's anything going for the Sun Devils, it's that and the fact that they lost Tay Martin. But we'll see. Go ahead, Connor. You wanted to flip it over to the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Now ASU is going to have their challenges kind of figuring out their identity. It's the second game of the season, correct? They have to go to
yes.
Oklahoma State.
We're going to Stillwater, yes.
So they're not even necessarily going to have a lot of time to figure out what the identity of this team's going to be. We know it's more than likely going to be the run game, but how effective is that run game going to be? Is Ricky Pearsall going to be the go-to guy with either Paul Tyson or Trenton Bourguet? We don't know. Is any of the receiver going to step up, right? That being said, is Oklahoma State losing anything on defense that we might be able to exploit come next season?
Yeah, like I said, they are losing their top 4 leading tacklers from a year ago. This is also a defense, Connor, that didn't force a lot of turnovers. And it looks like 3, 4, 5 of their interceptions, if I'm reading this right, are all gone. So 3 or 5 of their 7, 8, 9 of, right? Yeah. 5 of their 9 interceptions are gone. So that's really good news for the Sun Devils, is that a defense that didn't necessarily make a lot of turnovers is gone out the window. If there was one thing they did right, though, it was rush the passer. The good news is, again, they lost a lot of their top tier pass rushers, but there is a kid by the name of Colin Oliver. He was a true freshman last year. He sits at 6'2", 225 pounds. That's what he played at as a freshman. There's a very good chance he added some bulk. And if he did, that's really bad news for Arizona State, Connor, because you just lost your left tackle, Kellen Deesh. And this kid, as a true freshman, had 10.5 sacks, plus 15.5 tackles for loss. So if there's one dude who's going to be disruptive and is what we would call a game wrecker, it definitely would be Colin Oliver. They also have returning safety and defensive back Jason Taylor II. I do not know if he is related to Miami Dolphins legend Jason Taylor, but he's coming off a year. He had 48 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 2 picks, and a forced fumble. So he is definitely a playmaker in that secondary for them, and he's likely going to be one of the 2 most important defensive players for the Cowboys next year. These are both guys that Arizona State is going to have to find a way to minimize what they do, because this kid Colin Oliver seems like an absolute monster, and Jason Taylor is the playmaker on this defense. So if they can find a way to expose the other 9 players on the defense, then that's great, because I don't feel good about these 2.
Yeah, you talk about highlighting that pass rush, which I want to go back to for just a second. We have a kind of a potentially patchwork offensive line. I just, when you lose guys like Kellen Deesh and Donovan West and other guys are switching positions, like it could come together. It could gel. We don't know that, right? And I feel very confident in saying that losing some of our more talented players, certainly not going to be a good thing for us. And if you have a guy like Paul Tyson there with his cement shoes, not going to be able to step up and avoid the rush necessarily. So that will definitely be kind of an interesting part of the game to watch. Now let's at least talk about how do we feel like ASU is going to fare in this game? Do we think it's going to be a blowout? Do we think they have any sort of a shot? Do we think it'll be like somewhat competitive and then maybe Oklahoma State just pulls away? Richie, general thoughts on that?
Well, we will have to have a conversation with our good friend over at the Locked On, is it Locked On Pokes podcast? Something like that. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she is super duper smart. Here we go. Linda Lyons over at Locked On Pokes. We're going to have a conversation with her over the summer, if not just for the game, for her to break down this Oklahoma State team, because just like the Sun Devils, they are losing a lot. Your top 4 leading tacklers, your top rusher, your top receiver, that's a lot for any team to take advantage of. And we got to remember, this is an Oklahoma State team, Connor, that was this close to making the playoff with a 12-2 record. So I would be surprised if they don't have the guys and the depth to immediately just make their run and get back into the swing of things right now. But at the same time, losing that much, there's going to be regression. So again, factoring everything, this isn't a total wash for Arizona State on paper, right? It's not completely out of the window for the Sun Devils to go to Stillwater and pull out a win. However, you will be the underdogs 100%, because not only are the Cowboys a very good quality team, they have been coached by Mike Gundy, a very underrated college football head coach for the last 18 years. And the Cowboys have a very good home field advantage. So you're going in there as the underdogs, first of all. But I like the thought that this front seven will have a good opportunity to completely take away one side of the football for the offense and hopefully limit what Spencer Sanders can do as a passer. Unfortunately, he is a mobile quarterback, and we struggled mightily against mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, Mike Gundy was about 7 years old when he got hired, so he's been around. He's been around a while, so that'll go ahead and do it, at least for this part of the podcast. We'll talk about this game upcoming in much more depth as we get closer to it. But again, it's going to be, this is going to be a big one for ASU to be able to highlight throughout the year. If early on in the season, again, I said that they're not going to be able to potentially figure out their identity. If they were able to find a way to pull off that win, maybe that serves them much better on throughout the rest of the season. So with that, we're going to go ahead and talk about some baseball for the first time this year. You're listening to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where to find the next fired head coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the trends and BetOnline, where the game starts. We are back for the third part of today's Locked On Sun Devils podcast, talking to you about a little bit of baseball. So Richie, baseball has gone through just a couple series so far this year with new skipper Willie Bloomquist, former Sun Devils player, former Diamondbacks player, is now at the helm. Now, when this move was announced, in my opinion, it kind of gave the fan base a little bit of something to cheer about. Now, obviously, they have not gotten off to the right start. They're sitting at 3-4 in the year, and they've lost their last three games when they got swept by BYU. But very early on in the season, right? Like they're only sitting at they're essentially sitting at last place in the Pac-12 so far, but they haven't started Pac-12 play, and that's going to obviously be the most important thing. So with that, we're going to be talking about baseball a little bit more throughout this year as well. Fridays, we're going to be talking about kind of what's happened throughout the week, anything that we need to highlight. So we'll be talking about baseball a little bit more weekly as we go through this. Now, the team, even though they have not played necessarily overall well in each game, again, as I said, losing all three of their last games. Their first essentially series against Dixie State, they took that series 2-1. One of those games they won 17-8. So not a lot of pitching so far there. Then they beat Nevada 3-1, and then they got swept by BYU. Richie, they had their last game. They lost to BYU 19-3.
Is that
19-3. In football, not necessarily. In basketball, that's certainly not a lot. In baseball, yeah, that's a lot. So getting absolutely embarrassed, it'll be interesting to see how they can rebound. Ironically, against Oklahoma State, they get them on both March 1st and March 2nd. So we'll see if ASU is able to pull it out. Oklahoma State's a very quality baseball team, but we'll see what ASU could do, right? If they're hitting some of their, if they're kind of skidding early on this season, that's okay. But Willie's got to find a way to kind of galvanize this team moving forward so they're not hitting each of these series, kind of getting either, in this case, in 2-game series, taking 1-1. It would be really nice to get back for 500 and sweep Oklahoma State.
Yeah, so I think when we were coming into this year, we had to set our expectations a little lower because you had a new manager and you lost a lot. We were talking about this off mic before the podcast. We lost at least 3 guys to the draft by itself, let alone graduates and everything like that, which included the number 1 pick, Spencer Torkelson. So you lose guys like that, and it's going to be hard for any team to rebound, let's be honest. But for the baseball team, we'll see. I mean, starting the year 3-4 isn't exactly ideal, especially when in a series against BYU, you drop 3 straight, including, as you mentioned, that 19-3 final score. But this isn't a terrible team overall. You've got, let me see.
You've got a handful of guys. Like you got several guys that are playing okay. Now, when I say okay in terms of college rankings, right? Like when you look at college data, the pros, like those numbers aren't the same, right? So some players are doing very well overall. They got 5 guys hitting at least 280, but overall, like one of those guys like Jacob Tobias, only his OPS is .729. Nothing very impressive there, even though he's hitting 286. Now you have guys like Connor Davis, who's been their best offensive player so far this year. Now he's only got 22 at-bats compared to Tobias or Lamp, who have 30, or I should say just Lamp has 31 at-bats. But Davis so far is hitting .455 this year with just a little bit over a 1.3 OPS, which is absolutely phenomenal. He's got 2 home runs in this season and is tied for the team lead, second in RBIs with 5. So again, very early on this year, a lot of the numbers are inflated too, right? Like I guarantee you a lot of these guys are not going to hit what they are right now. Davis is not going to hit .455 at the end of the year. So things kind of got to get settled into place. And that's kind of how baseball seasons go, whether you're talking about pro or college, right? Like some of the other guys that are hitting 200 or below, they're not necessarily going to stay there. It's just they've only played 7 games so far. So whether the numbers are good and bad, they're inflated either way. Yeah,
100%. But I mean, this is a team that's hitting pretty dang well. When you look at your top 6 hitters, 3 of them are batting over 1,000, and a 4th guy with Sean McLean, not batting. Their OPS, excuse me. His OPS is 855. So these guys are hitting well. They're all batting pretty solid for the most part. The pitching hasn't been all that bad either. Tyler Myers pitched 7.2 innings. He's got a 1.17 ERA. Adam Tulloch has pitched 11 innings with a 1.64 ERA. And Kyle Luckham has a 2.89 ERA on 9.1 innings pitched. So those are your 3 leading pitchers as far as innings pitched. And all of them have ERAs under 3, with 2 of them under 2. So you've got a solid team, Connor. It's not like this is a baseball team that's completely rebuilding. There was just a lot of question marks going into the year. And so far, like you said, it's really early on. These stats are inflated, especially when you consider where we lost the game 19-3. We also won a game 17-8 against Dixie State. So we also have ourselves a game where we were able to really pump up those numbers and get the statistics looking really good. But we'll see. I mean, I feel like this is going to be a very fun game to watch. You're going to a game tomorrow night, actually. So you'll be able to see them live, and we will have a recap for you, of course, from a live source in Connor Drios. But we'll see, man. I feel like this is going to be a very fun, probably an up and down season. We'll see.
Yeah, so far their offense, as you had mentioned, was doing very well to start the year. Their pitching has, as a whole, been just as bad, but baseball in college works a little bit differently than the pros, right? Where a lot of guys in professional baseball have a 5-man rotation. A lot of college teams go to that 3-man rotation, right? They generally play those 2-3 games against an opponent, maybe have a day off, and a lot of these guys are still pitching every 5 days or so. But if your starters are doing okay, it seems like the bullpen might be giving up a little bit more than they would like, clearly.
Yeah, the bullpen's
so overall,
getting lit up.
Their ERA is sitting at a 5.63 as a whole, but again, maybe it's more so the bullpen than the starters so far. But we'll talk about that in a little bit more depth. We'll definitely kind of talk about the game against Oklahoma State that I will be attending. So, and again, end of the weeks, we're going to be talking about baseball, kind of wrapping everything that's happened throughout the week, kind of monitoring Willie Bloomquist and company throughout this season. So,
yeah,
that'll go ahead and
any of our baseball fans, just make sure you turn in, if for no other episode than that Friday episode.
Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to watch professional baseball? They don't have that option.
Literally no. Literally,
so you might as well watch a little bit of college baseball, get your fix. And if you like ASU, we'll kind of be knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. So that'll go ahead and do it for us on today's podcast. Thank you so much again for making us your first listen every single day. Again, you can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Cedrios. You can find Richie at Richie Brads with a Z36. We have our Locked On Sun Devils Twitter page. It's at @LO_Sun Devils. Then we have content that comes out Monday through Friday for you guys. If you hit that subscribe button, you are going to be the first person that is going to see that notification. Woo! Locked On Sun Devils has new content for you guys. And you can find us in multiple different types of platforms. You can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, and as well as YouTube in terms of a visual platform as well. So make sure to tune in again Monday through Friday for those and never miss an episode. Now make your second listen of the day Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It is free and available wherever you get your podcast. You're listening to the Locked On Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.